Podcaster refuses the opportunity to use a "he is risen" joke. More on this developing story as we have it. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, the Black Man, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I mean, look, it's not April yet. It's just not close enough to use that joke. And, frankly, it's been used everywhere. I'm sure there is a Jesus joke that, first of all, his name isn't Jesus, right? It's Gabriel Jesus. Now, to be fair, that's probably the Portuguese pronunciation of Jesus, so it would work in Portuguese. The real point here is there is no original joke to be made about Jesus returning. There's just a celebration to be had. And so I struggled with it. I think sometimes we all have a crisis of conscience. We want to do the best we can. We want to be the best people we can. And I decided that it was incumbent upon me to push back against the urge, against the tide, against the trend of making some kinds of quasi-Easter-related Jesus returning joke. So I have not made it. I invite you to insert your Jesus joke here. Okay, I hope you inserted a good one. Feel free to tell me what yours was, and maybe I'll just steal it for the next one. You never know. We are very, very, very close to announcing some live events. The Chicago event has already been announced. Third week, end of April. It's on the Chicago Gooners Twitter page. I'll post some information about it in the notes here, a link to that. But basically, there's a gala on Friday, a pod on Saturday, and a watch on Sunday. Assuming the game moves to Sunday, it's the Southampton game, I believe, which is a Friday game. But assuming we can get past Sporting, it will be a Sunday game. And that event, all the proceeds for the podcast are going to go to our fundraiser, which is going to kick off in April. And we'll have more news on that coming very soon, and something that I'm really excited for us to do. Now, there is another event that's about to be announced. The final T's are being crossed, the final I's are being dotted, and that will be announced, I believe, this week. So keep an ear out, eye out, or both eyes out, or both ears out. I don't know for that. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. We got a lot of really, really beautiful football to discuss, and we have to discuss it with Paul. You can find him on Twitter at PosMyPants. Hello, Pos.
Woohoo! I'm workshopping a new joke around Gabriel Jesus. It involves a burial cave and a large stone that people are rolling in front of it, as was in the New Testament, and taking 3 days to roll the stone away. And that's kind of like the parking the bus thing, but with Gabriel Jesus. So still working on that. Might be ready for the next pod or so.
You let me know how that goes. We'll keep an anxious ear out for that one.
I think it's going to kill.
That's another issue. Maybe poor choice of words there. And Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Yeah. No need to add to that. Okay. So, by the way, Clive did appear on the Instant Reaction, which was a good time had by all. As you can imagine, we were in buoyant spirits at the time, and we still are. So that's a good thing. The only thing is because the clocks have gone ahead in the U.S., Paul and I have shit for brains is the best way I can put it, because we're real tired. So it happens, but maybe that's not different than ever before. So Tim, there's really no other place to start than the team news, and It's interesting how getting a couple of world-class players back available can change the way you look at things, because leading up to this game. Yeah, it makes a bit of a difference.
I've always been a believer that good players are a good thing to have.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's kind of like having more talent helps you be a better team. But it's funny, right? Because the gymnastics mentally were, is it going to be Nelson, Saka, and Martinelli? Does he start Smith Rowe? Does Vieira come into the front three? Those decisions look pretty easy when Trossard's back all of a sudden. And so Trossard's back, Jesus is on the bench, and a lot of this game is about those two players and the former in particular. So, I think that really must have lifted the team to know that he was available. And this game, Trossard just came back with a point to prove, it felt. It's hard to look past that news as a place to start, and in particular, Trossard's performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I felt better when I saw it. And when Charles Watts broke the story on Saturday evening that Trossard and Jesus were both going to be in the squad, in my head, that was, well, they're probably going to share the game. Probably about 70-20, probably Gabriel Jesus not ready for 60 minutes. But, on both the Instant Reaction and the podcast we did after the Sporting game, I kind of hinted at the fact that I was a little bit worried about the forward line, not because any of them are bad players, but just because they haven't really played together very much. I worried about, the amount of fluidity and interchange you get with those players, because Nelson's very much a winger is a winger is a winger, which is not a slight on him. But, perhaps just hasn't played enough football with that front line yet to really have those, like that cross-pollination that has really dug us out of a hole recently. And I was frustrated because I was thinking, God, we learned to play without Jesus, with Nketiah, and then teams kind of worked us out with Nketiah, so we switched to Trossard, and that's looked great, and now we've got to think of something else. And I was frustrated by it, and I was thinking, because I would have been quite confident about this game, just because, again, I think I said this on the main pod, without Palhinha, Fulham are a completely different team. That's 10 goals conceded in the 3 games he hasn't played this season. So that tells you a lot. And it's not just his quality, it's the fact that they don't have another player like him. I was reading some stuff that from Peter Rutler, I think his name is, who writes about Fulham for The Athletic, and he was like, it's not just a quality drop-off. They just don't have another player like that. Probably similar to where we were with Thomas Partey before Jorginho was signed. So I was confident about, and all of Fulham's underlying metrics suggested that they were on a bit of a lucky streak as well. And I saw a bit of their game against Brentford, and I thought we can take these. But I was thinking, but we've got a really makeshift front three who haven't really played together that much, and the positions are going to be more rigid again. So when Trossard was back in, I was like, nice. And you know what else I looked at when I looked at, and I felt much more comfortable with that because I think he's been a revelation, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But the other thing it really helped, I looked at that subs bench, and I looked at it and I thought, every single one of those players, I'm fine if they come on. Like, probably the quote-unquote weakest player on the bench was Rob Holding. And it's like, well, he's probably not going to have to come on anyway, unless we're clinging on to a 1-goal lead in stoppage time. But even him, like in that scenario, I'm fine with it. I'm fine for him doing that specific job, maybe nothing else. But I looked at the whole bench and I thought, that looks good. Like, we can, regardless of the game state, we can and should use all 5 subs, because all of those players look fine to me to come in. So that's just the other bit of security it gave me. But I just think Trossard was a signing at the time I compared to Diogo Jota at Liverpool, and I'm still quite happy with that comparison, because you have quite a nice front line.
Yep.
And you think, that's a really good front line, and I'm not really sure, but like, obviously you need some sense of backup there. And the way Liverpool handled it with Jota was brilliant, because it's like Jota can fit into any one of those positions. And I think the same about Trossard. He's doing a brilliant turn as a false 9 and interchanging with Martinelli. But any one of those forwards gets injured, I'm fine. Like, if Saka's injured, fine with Trossard on the right. Martinelli's injured, I'm fine with Trossard left, like anywhere on that carousel. And that made me feel a lot better, definitely.
And players are human beings too, right? When you have to start with Nelson and Martinelli at center forward, and your only option off the bench is maybe Vieira plays in the front 3, like, the players may go into that thing, it's going to be a hard day, we just have to fight and find a way through, we don't have all our weapons. Trossard coming back will have lifted them, certainly would have lifted Martinelli, who's, I think, looked great since Trossard's coming to the side. But I think seeing Jesus on the bench, knowing, the players will have had their heads drop a bit when that injury news broke. Maybe everyone except Nketiah, right? Would have had their heads go down a bit. This was going to be our season. Can we get through it without him? And they knew all along, we've got to just find a way to stay top without this guy. And him being back on the bench sends that message. We've done it. We made it. We got there. We get through this game. He's properly back. We're still 5 points clear with, by the way, next weekend a chance to go 8 points clear. City don't play in the league. And I think that had to lift the team. But we'll get to the trio of assists and the performance from Trossard in more detail in a bit, Paul. But what I thought was interesting, for about the first 12, 15 minutes of this game, we were sort of trying to figure them out. And I think it must have been interesting in a way, right? It's kind of like, it'd be like a zoo animal with the cage door open being like, so I can just like go out and maul all these people? Is that what you're saying? Like, I don't have to stay behind the cage and be nice and hope they give me, like, I can just go maul all of them. You sure? Because Fulham weren't sitting in a low block. And if you look at what we've faced recently, with the exception of the City game, and even City did it a bit, right? Lots of low blocks, lots of congesting the center and forcing us out wide, and all game of trying to pass it around the final third, trying to probe for an opening while making sure we don't get hit on the counter. And here come Fulham, and they push up a bit, and they're in more of a mid block. They press a little bit. They try to come out at us a little bit. And for about 12 minutes, I think we were just trying to figure out how to pick the holes. And then we started picking them left, right, and center and played some scintillating football. So, Paul, what do you think about sort of the way the opening stages developed and the fact that the team kind of caught on eventually to the idea that the cage door was open, that we didn't have to spend all game breaking down a low block for a change?
Yeah, I love your analogy. I think we actually tried to do what we normally do. We just didn't quite get our claws into them for like 14, 15 minutes. And I think maybe this is how Fulham would have played anyway, but wasn't that basically how they played against us at the Emirates to a degree, where they were pressing our back line? They got a turnover against, was it Gabriel, fairly early on, got a goal up, and they must have been thinking, why not? We're playing at home. Why don't we try and strike first and get that goal? They certainly pushed our back line. And we did the pressing thing. I wasn't positive that we had done the kind of trying to do the fast start. I don't think we were maybe fully at it, but we did all the pressing stuff. We had Odegaard, Trossard, Saka, pushing hard, pushing their back line. They'd play through us just a little bit, lose the ball to us. We'd pick it up in midfield. They had the mid block. So for like 14, 15 minutes, we were recovering the ball, but we were recovering it in midfield or a little deeper, playing it around the back, playing it up, back. I think we saw that, playing it through the lines. And my first thought was maybe our strategy was just to kind of play it up and back and through the lines to move it around the place. I think we were trying to press their back line, but they did a decent job of playing out. And then we got our claws into them. Took us that the first time we kind of got into them was that little cross into the 6-yard box that Xhaka and Martinelli combined for. I think it went to Leno's hands. The next moment is like 16 minutes into it. It's the Martinelli offside. And from then all hell breaks loose and the goal is inevitable. We've 3 corners in a row. We get the 2 goals, one after the other. As you say, at some point, the Tiger realizes the gate door is open. Nobody's going to stop them. And there's a whole bunch of tourists just standing outside with ice cream and cameras. We rip them limb from limb, and they just stand there for a while, for basically 46 minutes till we get 3 nice goals, and we go back to our cage, lie down, and groan because our bellies are full.
Can I just add to that as well? Like,
to the analogy or to the point? Because to the analogy, I would say no.
No, to the point. But
okay,
I think immediately after these Europa League away games, like the first 15 minutes is so crucial. And Fulham made a massive mistake because they elected to sit off. Whereas, I mean, if I was Marco Silva, I'd be saying first 15, because generally, after a European away game like that, such close proximity, teams they're not on their mettle until about 15 minutes in, and that's when they're vulnerable. And you could kind of see that. Like, we were patient, we were passing around, we didn't create anything because a little bit foggy, a little bit tired, and that's when, as the opposing team, you should go for these teams. And Fulham were very accommodating and decided to sit off. They decided to have a go at us for the first 15 minutes of the second half when it was already over.
Yeah, and if you look at the last recent run of games, we've had 2 really easy laughers of games where we were dominant. Everton and this one. And we got an opening goal, right? And once you get an opening goal, you change the dynamic, right? Everton would go into half with a 2-goal lead, and they really had nothing for us in the second half. In this game, again, once we got the lead, whatever Fulham were trying to do, it worked less and less and less. And I just think that makes such a difference against teams that want to just stifle you, want to frustrate you. Look at City. I mean, we think of City as this juggernaut, but if Michael Olise doesn't completely lose his marbles and just get finessed into the most obvious penalty you've ever seen coming. Like, as that's developing, I was like, oh, he's gonna foul him there, and they're gonna get a penalty. Like, it was literally like that. I think that game ends 0-0. Breaking down low blocks is hard, even against mediocre teams. And when you get an early goal, that's how you wind up with 3, 4, 5, and so on. And so it could have been on this day. Now, we did. And by the way, congratulations to Mikel Arteta on his 100th win. It is a remarkable achievement to have accomplished at this point. There was once upon a time, I think many of us may have been worried, was he going to get to this point? But he's done it in style, and we can certainly celebrate that a bit more another time. So, Tim, I actually think that the first goal that's offside is a little bit of a sign of things to come. It's a nice back to front move. Xhaka with a really lovely ball into Martinelli, who I want to say times his run really nicely. You could see he tries to hold it. He knows he can sprint past him. How can you blame a guy for being, a big toe offside? He thinks he's held his run. And I don't think he does anything wrong there, by the way. I think it's the reward his play deserves because he kind of opens his body and hits it really nicely. It's a great save from Leno, and it rebounds in. And while that is offside, I think that's the sign of things to come. I think that was when we started to figure it out. And it's just, a look at the other kind of goals that we created throughout the game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the moment that Martinelli realised he, quote unquote, had Tete at fullback. And what was even more interesting to me about this, the camera. I mean, this is a reasonably obvious thing to do, right? But the camera cut to Arteta once it was disallowed, and he was like waving his arms and motioning. And I really think we learned something from Leicester, because you were in the stadium, Elliot, after that goal got disallowed against Leicester. The whole half died. Like, it just died. The stadium died. The game died.
Fans and players, yeah.
And I think this time, they learned something from that. I think Arteta was very much like, look, don't let that happen again. Take this as a sign that you've got them. Don't let the disappointment and the, kind of swallow you up. So, because that's what I was worried about. Like, I was so happy about that goal because at the time, it didn't come out of nowhere, but we hadn't opened them up yet. That was the first time we opened them up. And I was thinking, yes, early goal. I feel so confident when Arsenal get an early goal, so comfortable. And I was thinking, here we go. And when it was disallowed, to me, it felt like such a dagger. But my immediate thought was, don't let what happened in the Leicester game, because in the Leicester game there was a real confluence of pressure and it felt like it was coming, and then it was taken away from us, and you could sense that this wasn't quite the same, because there wasn't that same sense that it was coming. But I think they really learned something about controlling that situation emotionally, and look, all right, we got them on a set piece, but how did we get the set piece? It's because we opened them up on the left side again. Xhaka gets a shot in. We might have maybe we won't have the discussion because there's so much else to talk about. But, maybe on another day we can bank this as our retiring Xhaka thing, where it's like maybe someone who's a little bit better in the box might have had a couple of goals. But, we get the corner because we open them up again and get that set piece. And we just, essentially what we allowed ourselves to do was win this game in a 20 to 30 minute period of utter dominance. And that's generally how these things are won. It's very rare that even when you win by a big score, it's quite rare that you have a whole 90 minutes. Usually you get your dominant 20, 30 minutes, and that's when you've got to capitalise. And we'll come on to it later, how I felt when the third goal went in. But yeah, this it's weird for such a comfortable victory. I still experience this as a bit of an emotional roller coaster. That no, we've had a goal disallowed, and yes, we're 2-0 up, and then oh my god, why are we not 3-0 up? Come on, you've got to get the third goal. And yeah, I still experience.
And actually, if you want to add a little twist into the roller coaster there, oh my god, Ramsdale tried to make it 2-1, right? Because before we get the third, Ramsdale gives it to Pereira, I think it was, who shoots over. So
yeah, and he had a couple of moments, I think, where he kind of needed a bit of a scare because he was taking it was a bit too easy, I think. But yeah, so I'm really pleased with how they responded to that, and I just think maybe it's a coincidence, but I just felt like that Leicester experience really informed how we responded to this.
And it's a reminder, too, that when you have a 25-minute period of dominance, you can win a game in that 25 minutes, but if you don't win the game in that 25 minutes, suddenly it can go the other way. From the 21st minute to the 45th minute, we were imperious for most of it. But if we had missed our chances, they could have been 1-0 up. Right? I mean, with the Ramsdale error. But instead, we get the Gabriel goal, we get the Martinelli goal, we get the Odegaard goal, we nearly get the Granit Xhaka sensational move for a goal. We get White to Martinelli at the back post, who shins it a little bit, and and Leno saves brilliantly. I mean, there was just move after move after move. And the Granit Xhaka one, I wanted that so bad. It was a little bit Norwich, Jack Wilshere with the pinged passes. And it's funny, right? Because you could criticize Shaq and be like, gosh, he had chances to make this an even bigger game, but he's not really an 8. But to his credit, he should have had an assist for, the opening goal was an own goal, I guess, but it's ruled out. But then he also plays the beautiful pass to Trossard in the back to front flowing move that leads to the Martinelli goal. I thought he was really good in this game. I thought this game was an example of how good he can be. It just is the reality that his role demands a little bit of the qualities that Xhaka has at the expense of some of the other things you might want that left 8 position to have. And oh, by the way, if we get a Declan Rice to play that position, he will do some of the Xhaka stuff. He's not exactly a twinkle-toed forward himself, so it's not like he's going to be Santi Cazorla-ing it around defenders and into the box. So yeah, just something to think about for the summer, not for now necessarily. Paul, quickly though, I mean, it's been lost in the beautiful football we play, but the opening goal is a Gabriel header from a corner, a Trossard corner. I think corner delivery was great in this game, and Trossard obviously a big factor in that. We're now consecutive games with our center back scoring goals, Saliba against Sporting and Gabriel against Fulham. And I think we are so lucky to have this pair of center backs. And I mean, by the way, then, 15 minutes later, you got Saliba dropping the shoulder, dribbling past 2 guys and firing a shot nearly into the top corner from 30 yards out. They were on it. Saliba himself plays a big role in the Martinelli goal, which is a long string of passes at the back and in the midfield. And then it goes back to Saliba and he's under pressure at the back. And does he float across back to Xhaka? No, he pings an outswinger or an in-swinger cross to Xhaka to send him away. To
with
send
his
it
left.
To yeah, with his left. Our center backs provide the entire platform for the rest of the team to play the way they do. And on a day when we score 3 goals, it'd be easy to just talk Trossard and Jesus' return, but I don't want to just do that. Gabriel gets it started with the header. Saliba just dripping sauce all over the game after that. I think we need to talk about the responsibility these guys take in this game, in this season, for opening the scoring, for allowing us to play the way we do. And I think they're the best center back pairing in the league.
Yeah, they are huge. I like to think of them as a marriage. I don't know where I came up with that from, but they're a happy marriage.
Yeah, I don't know. No one's ever said it before. Mikel Arteta should use that analogy. It would be a good one.
He should. It explains some difficult moments in press conferences. He should write that down and use it. The celebration after Gabriel's goal, like Saliba's all over him, pointing at him, laughing. Like there's just, you see the camaraderie there. The other interesting thing on the headed goal, I think it's the third corner. I think Trossard pings in basically all 3 of them, all good corners, keeps the pressure on. The first one's a short one, I think, to Martinelli. Doesn't quite come off. It goes out for a corner. A couple more come in. And White is the guy marking Bernd Leno on the corner, kind of using his body to keep him away from the ball. And where the ball goes is exactly where Leno was standing before he tried to get around White. He has to move to the other side of him, and there's this big gaping hole there. And
you realize that the VAR officials are listening to this pod going, oh, we could have ruled it out. We could have ruled it out.
Well, he didn't hold his pinky. So there's some kind of rule. Probably advice the referees gave the teams that if you hold the pinky. And it was kind of interesting as well. I then, having watched the goal, I then ended up doing a bit of a rewatch. And at the start, they're all standing in the tunnel and Bernd Leno's shaking everybody's hand and it's all very, very friendly. And then they get to the one guy who looks very kind of eyes down and a little, I would say, sneaky was Ben White. It was like that the Judas just before the Last Supper. He had that kind of shifty look about him. I'm like, he's the guy who's been tasked with doing mean things to Bernd Leno at the corner and feels bad about it, because it is him on all the corners who's trying to give Bernd Leno a long.
I don't know Ben White that well, but he doesn't feel bad about it.
when the cock crows 3 times, I shall have my hands around your arms so that you can't catch the corner, as the famous Bible phrase has it.
Yes,
I
and
pushed
yet
back
Elliot
heavily against the Jesus, he is risen stuff at the beginning of the pod, and we've gone straight biblical from there.
Yeah, that fired me up. So I'm like, screw it. You need to go back to Bible studies. There's so much more material in here we can work.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that goal is obviously a critical moment. It comes from a set piece. I'm sure Nicholas Jover is a bit stung by the criticisms of our set pieces on both ends and has been working feverishly to get this going again. We're back at it, and of course it's a big moment that turns things around, but it's pressure. It's 3 corners in a row. I remember thinking by the 3rd corner, gosh, we really should take advantage of these corners. It'd be a shame if we have lots of corners and get nothing out of it, and we ping it in. Off we go. We're off to the races, but we don't make the mistake of sitting back. That's when we got our teeth into it. This is what good teams do. They take that and they say, go again. And the next goal that we're about to talk about is an absolute work of art.
Yeah. And I just think celebrating these center backs is important, because scoring goals is fun and being an attacking team is fun, but they do have a bit of a high wire act that they are playing, and they're playing it so well. And I love, by the way, late in the game, how hard they worked to protect this clean sheet and how important it was to them. There's a moment, I think it's late in the game. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, where Saliba tracks down Dan James, and James has a step on him, and Saliba just easily chases him down and goes to ground and takes the ball off him. Paul?
Yeah, and Gabriel has a big tackle kind of 40 minutes-ish into the game where he just doesn't clear the man out, but it was a clear the man out, get the ball kind of tackle, but the guy jumps over it. Big kind of cheer from the crowd. Just they're just so into it. And to your point about a high wire act, there are games where these guys look really stretched and they make a mistake here or there. I think we know this, but you just got to understand these guys are doing about the toughest job you can ask centre backs to do.
Yep.
Standing on the halfway line, being the last line of defense. With what's an attack want? They want all that space behind your centre backs. That's what forwards against you want. They want all that space. Well, they got it with these 2 guys, and almost every time they pull it off. And on a day like today or yesterday where we had more control and they look a little better, that's great. But we should bank a little understanding and credit for them for those days in which they are the only thing between us and the great peril.
Yeah, and I didn't know where to end that, but you ended it super dramatically. I will say they're not even sitting on the halfway line. They're sitting on the edge of the attacking third. It's just crazy, dribbling people and shooting. Tim, the second goal is brilliant. And it's funny, right? Because it's brilliant except for the finish, which is the easiest finish in the history of humanity. But I almost feel like all the passing and all the moving that we did pulls them apart. And then by the time the Trossard cross comes in, the defenders don't really have anywhere to be. Right? The defender at the near post, it goes over him. And I mean, look, Robinson does nothing. It's dreadful. But all he can do at that point is go through the back of Martinelli.
He's given up at that point.
Yeah, he's kind of given up. I think we have to talk Trossard. And then I want to talk about Odegaard. Zinchenko and Partey a little bit, because I think that there's something happening there that I'd like to break down. But let's talk about Trossard. It's his second assist. But throughout that period, even after that goal and all the way to halftime, there's also the Trossard miss. But it's not a bad miss, right? Where he shifts it. I think that was where you tweeted, use your weaker foot, to be fair.
No, that was about Xhaka.
That was Xhaka. Yeah. That was the Xhaka shot. Because that was his weaker foot, actually.
Yeah.
That he uses. It just flies by the
One
side.
One of the many reasons I like the player.
Yeah. He has the assist for the Odegaard goal. The funny thing is, I don't think his assists are the best part of his game, right? The The corner's a good corner, fair enough, but anything can happen there. The assist to Martinelli is sort of floated almost, but they just can't recover. And the one to Odegaard, there's still a lot of work to be done. But it's what he does bringing other people into the play. And I think he is able to ape the Jesus role. And it's funny because when Jesus comes in, what do you see? He's in midfield. He's laying it off with, spin flicks and little reverse passes. And I think Trossard apes that role well and also understands how to switch positions really well. I mean, look at the goal. Martinelli's in the center and Trossard's on the left. So, I mean, certainly feel free to break down any of the assists. But for me, what it is with Trossard is his understanding of space and connection and the way that brings other players into the game. I think we look like the Arsenal team we've been more of the season when he's standing there at center forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's a real carousel when he's in there. It's funny because we look like Man City looked last season, and whereas Man City, they've gone with this fixed striker now, and they've almost got the issue that we had with Nketiah, just with a much better player. So the payoff is kind of there. But yeah, he promotes that whole carousel thing. Just look at Martinelli's goal contributions record. When Trossard is playing,
is it 5 and 5 now?
Yeah, and it's not a coincidence, and particularly for Martinelli, that's so important that there's that interchange because Martinelli's not really a winger; he's a wide forward. But when Nketiah is playing up front, he has to be a winger. Whereas with Trossard, the interchange of positions, and it's not just that Trossard always goes out wide and Martinelli always goes central. That tends to be what happens when Martinelli scores, but it goes the other way as well. You see plenty of times where, the disallowed goal, Martinelli is the one that's out wide. But the thing is with Trossard, it kind of sounds easy in a way that kind of, he goes off into the left and Martinelli swaps, but that's not easy. Otherwise, other players would just do that. It's the understanding of when to do it. And given how few games he's had for Arsenal and how few games he's had with Martinelli, for that understanding to form so quickly is immense. And it's just, you remember after a certain amount of time under Arsene Wenger, you got that, he's a Wenger player. And then you'd get Rosicky or Hleb or someone like that, and you go, Wenger player. And that just became shorthand and everyone knew what you meant. Trossard's an Arteta player. That's it's just, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to fit into the system. And to be fair, Brighton, I've said this before, probably a good club to buy from because they have that tactical flexibility and understanding. And he played as a wing back for Brighton a few times as well, which is, I'm not sure I'm expecting him to see that role for Arsenal, but there's potentially another kind of arm to this. But his just understanding of space and when I'm sure, for example, when Nketiah plays, I'm sure he's not stupid. I'm sure he's thinking, I should probably pull over into the left channel a bit more. But it's just easier said than done. Whereas I think Trossard just has that intrinsic understanding of when to stay still, when to move, when to plug gaps as they appear. And I agree with you. Basically they're all crosses. One's a set piece, but 2 crosses from the left wing from your striker, that tells you that they're not kind of staying up front. And when you get that right, that's so hard to play against. But it's harder than it looks to get it right. Otherwise, everyone would just do that. Everyone would do that, but they don't because it's hard. And usually it takes some time. So it's phenomenal that this guy has been able to come in and do this straight away. And honestly, it's such a good signing. I think Mudryk will probably go on to be a big star, but I think we got the good end of the deal here for what we have to do this season. And, look, I don't think Trossard's going to be a busted flush next season either. I think this is such a good signing. I really do.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's in his prime. You need some players in their prime. We're trying to do this with kids, but the kids are generational kids. You need some players in their prime. And you look at the ones who are in their prime. Zinchenko, Thomas Partey, Trossard, Gabriel Jesus. They're pretty important, aren't they?
Yeah.
Pretty important.
I think like the phrase I've used most on this podcast this season is some players make the system and some are made by the system.
Mm-hmm.
Trossard definitely makes the system. He makes it work.
Yeah, yeah. And the best compliment I can pay him is just kind of like what you were saying. He just looks like an Arsenal player. Like it's almost hard for me to believe he was playing for another team at some point this season, because it just feels like he's been a part of this the whole way, because that's how well he fits into it. And I'll nail my colors to the mast. I don't think Mudryk's going to make it as a star. And I could wind up looking really silly on that. I just don't see it. I mean, he's so young, so there's plenty of time for that to happen, but he's not as young as Saka. He's not as young as Martinelli, right? We'll see. But the point is, you're not trying to make, not every signing is about the project. Some signings are about the season, especially when you're trying to win a title. And there's just no question who was the better signing for that purpose. Paul, I don't want to shut you out of the Trossard conversation, although we got a lot more to get to. Essentially, I think just to sort of wrap up on this, it's that, some players are the force of nature player, the player that can do it on their own. And some players, one of the most important things they can do is make the other players around them better and make the system feel like it works. I don't think Trossard is going to have too many moments in this season where he just shakes his way past three defenders and puts it in the top corner, although I think that's in his locker. But that's not what you're asking him to do. And I think he's doing something arguably more important, which is the impact he's had on Martinelli, which is the impact he has on bringing the team into it. No, by the way, it takes a lot of pressure off Bukayo Saka, right? We're not sat here talking about Saka having a bit of a muted performance, although I think he was fine, because he didn't have to do everything in the way it felt like he did a few weeks ago. And I think that for me is what you get. Zinchenko and Trossard both maybe share that, in that their role is about making everybody else come into the game and look better, and he does it brilliantly.
Yeah, look, he has a huge advantage, Trossard, as a false nine, because he's a false nine. He's not a nine.
Right.
All his wiring is about playing in another part of the pitch, seeing the map, and he's done it. He's played centrally for Brighton. I haven't watched those games.
Sorry, if you're a center back, though, versus going up against an elite striker, don't you think this is a harder day? You don't have anyone to really mark. You're not banging bodies. You're not doing the things as a center back that are like comfortable for you, and you don't know who's going to pop up where, versus a fixed point that you can kind of key on,
Yeah, no, it's confusing for their back line, because the first thing Trossard will do is leave his post. He does not want to be standing beside two centre-backs, whereas Eddie, his whole existence has been, how do you play the central areas? Oh, as Tim says, oh, hang on, aren't I supposed to do that thing where I get over to the left wing to confuse them a bit? Yes, I must remember to do that occasionally. Trossard is like, what am I doing standing in the middle? I'm much more comfortable over where that Martinelli fella is. That's really the spot I want to be. Let me get over there at the earliest possible moment. And so he's going one way, Martinelli's coming the other way. Xhaka's looking for the chance to kind of do a little diagonal between the two of them. Zinchenko's looking to stand anywhere but where a fullback should, in the free spaces. And so for me, Trossard is the first mover, and he's just wired to not be in the center. Like that, there's nothing about standing in the center that he feels comfortable about. So the first thing he does is he looks for the opportunity 100% of the time to make that move, and it stirs the pot. I mean, it will be hard not to think that this style of system is suited to not having a center forward. That's what Pep struggled with, you might say, with Barcelona for so long, not having a striker. Does he need a striker? But he puts a striker in, and it doesn't work as well. Like, the whole history of this particular system is, and like, I listened to a podcast, it was the Times podcast yesterday, talking about Haaland at City and how brilliant he is and how great he is and how many goals, and like, you can't fault Haaland and this. And I'm like, yeah, but they're just not as good, and they're just not scoring as many goals. And I don't think you can look at the two things. Now, they may crack it eventually. They may crack it this season and go on a run where they have the best of both. Positional play and Haaland banging in millions of goals. Jesus at something like averaged 56 touches per game at City. and Haaland is something like half that. And like that's perfectly fine because he's banging in the goals. But you look at City and it's not really perfectly fine. And here we are, we're without a centre forward. And we look, every time Trossard starts as a centre forward, we look great. We just look like we're mincing them. And I don't think it's necessarily because Trossard is always great, but he has been. We've seen Trossard on the left wing not be good for us. Not his fault. It was kind of like we had Martinelli. He was struggling. Teams had us pinned down. Trossard does that gig. He's getting pinned down. And it's like, okay, but you play him at centre forward. Suddenly, back lines don't know where we're going to be, don't know who to mark. There's really no point in marking anybody because he's gone and some other guy's coming. And what a centre back's trying to do is work out who's going to show up and when. Meet him at the train station. Who am I supposed to meet? As Martinelli switches inside, or maybe not, or maybe it's Xhaka. He's just the first mover stirring the pot, and it works great for our system.
Yeah, I'll hit you with a couple of stats, by the way. Trossard, first player since Santi Cazorla to have a hat trick of goals in a season and also a hat trick of assists in a season. And while we're doing stats, I'll hit you with one from Opta Joe. Arsenal are the first team in the history of English football, as far as I think is what his stat said, to have 5 consecutive away London derbies won with a clean sheet. Now, that is a pretty specific statistic, but when you're racking up accolades, you might as well take them.
Remember when we used to rack up the terrible stats only like a season ago? It was all up to this, that. We're all like, oh, stop with the stats.
I want to talk Odegaard, Partey, and Zinchenko because I think there's something happening there, but there's also something happening in your pants and we need to talk about it. You're growing hair. And if spring is about anything, it's about renewal, and renewal is about anything, it's about trimming. It's about trimming things back. In fact, trimming things back is good because it helps things stay alive, right? Like shrubs and bushes and trees, you prune them, and that's actually good for them. And I would submit that it would be good for your privates to be pruned. If not pruned, just fully shaved. Let's not prune, let's shave. And let's do it with Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. The Performance Package 4.0 gets you the Lawnmower 4.0, which I am proud to say I used just yesterday. It's in the shower. It's just sitting there waiting for me. I almost never need to charge it. And if I do charge it, I can use the wireless charger, contactless. You just slide it in the little stand and it charges. It has, it's wet, dry. It has skin-safe technology, so I don't have to worry about nicks and cuts and things like that. Really long battery life. It's got a guard. It's just a phenomenal purpose-built trimmer. The Weed Whacker is for ears and nose hair. Ears and nose hair, right? That's it. The deodorant is included. The toner is included. The performance boxer briefs, which are the ones I always use when I work out. Yes, I wash them between workouts. Every 5 workouts, I wash them, I promise. And a travel bag to hold all your goodies. Okay, so you can get all of that. You can clean up your downstairs area, I guess is how you might put that. It even comes with a shed travel bag to take it with you when you travel. Save 20% and free shipping with the code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. I'm telling you, if spring is about anything, it is certainly about that. But, if your privates are healthy, that's a start, but your mind needs to be healthy too. And I'm proud to say this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy. It's therapy. It just happens to be online. Some of the benefits include, the ability to do this at a time that works for you, in a way that works for you. Okay, it is a thing that I feel passionately that we get wrong as a society, treating mental health differently than we treat nutritional health, physical health, right? Medical health. It's part of your body. It's the most important part of your body, and you should take care of it, not when there's a crisis, before there's a crisis. Okay? So what are you going to do? You're going to get paired with a therapist that meets your specific needs, right? You have the ability to change if it's not working out. You can do it camera on or camera off, right? Which is great, depending on the level of comfort that you feel. You can get someone who's a specialist in your area. So I just think there's a lot of really great things about the way this is done. And I would just say, if it is crisis time, you need to do this. But if it's not crisis time, this is the way you stay out of being in a crisis. Flexible scheduling. I think so many people just don't do therapy because life is too too challenging as it is, trying to get to work, trying to get to activities. BetterHelp makes it easy. So go to BetterHelp.com/vision today and get 10% off your first month. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp.com/vision. Do it now. Last but not least, sorry, it's a three-banger day, but it was a three-banger Sunday, so it can be a three-banger Monday. I think that's what they call it. But this one I love, Shady Rays. Real simple. Shady Rays are phenomenal, polarized sunglasses. They do custom snow goggles as well. The deal that they're offering is just wild, okay? You can go to shadyrays.com and use code ArsenalVision. You get half off, 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses or more, okay? And they have said they will replace them if they're lost or broken. The only reason I bought sunglasses in probably the last 15 years is because I lost a pair or broke a pair. They're going to replace them. Reason enough to try it. Like, even if you have a pair that you love, if you're going to travel, take the Shady Rays, because if you lose them or you break them, you're going to get them replaced. It's just like, it's a no-brainer to me. And the polarization is great. They have tons of great styles. If you don't love them, you can exchange them for a new pair or just return them for free within 30 days. So it's exclusive for you guys. Shady Rays giving out the best deal of the new year. Go to shadyrays.com and use code ArsenalVision for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 200,000 people. Shadyrays.com. Promo code ArsenalVision. Is that another?
Indeed. That is brave coming to me. Surprise. With a... No.
I know. I gave you the chance. I gave you the moment, and you thrived. Let's not ruin it. Tim.
Yes.
It's hard to say what our system is, right? 4-3-3, 4-2-3. Who knows? It's like 2-3-5 or 2-3-2-3 or WM, whatever you want to call it. But the guys that are facilitating this are Zinchenko and Partey, and I think Odegaard gets in that group too. And if you look at the stats from the game, it's interesting, right? Because let's look at, Zinchenko. So Odegaard had 75 touches. Partey had 74 touches. And Zinchenko had 57, but in 71 minutes, right? So you're looking at about 75, and on pace for about 75 touches. Almost identical. And I don't think that's an accident. The technical level in that group is so important, because if you try to come press us in midfield, if you try to come contest those areas, Partey can step past you. I mean, there was that moment at the end of the game where he's got 2 Fulham players closing in on him, one behind him, and he drags it back and turns and sprints away. And even the Fulham fans are oohing at it. It was incredible. Zinchenko just pops up wherever he's needed. So Thomas Partey knows wherever I am, I can look, because Zinchenko will be 2 yards away from me, and Odegaard will be 2 yards away from me. And you can't guard those guys. Odegaard had I think it was for the Trossard missed chance in the box. Odegaard did some kind of ridiculous flick. I'm not totally even sure what it was. The technical level of those 3 in the middle of the park make it impossible for teams to contest that area. And they were at the absolute peak of their powers in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably a slightly simplistic way to describe it, but I'd say like Partey controls the space and Zinchenko controls the ball. And like, obviously Partey's really good on the ball as well. And Zinchenko's a great appreciator of space. That's how he's able to pop up in all of these places. But I think very broadly and a bit crudely, that's what happens. Like, Zinchenko has all the brush strokes with the ball. He's fantastic on it. As you guys mentioned in the instant reaction, I think it was Paul, actually, he's got a lovely disguise on his pass. It's very difficult to know where he's going. Like, he doesn't give anything away with his body shape. I bet he'd be a great penalty taker, by the way, because of that. And so, he brings all that. And then Partey, in this game in particular, it just really jumped out at me. The extent to which he just suffocates teams because of the way he's able to just jump out of midfield and swallow the ball up. The second it looks like the other team are going to build some momentum or go forward, if there is a slight loose ball, bang, he's out. He's swallowed it up. He's so good technically that you can't get the ball back off him again, and Arsenal are away again. And just the amount of the extent to which those players are able to keep teams under pressure, that's where things have really changed in this quote unquote project. and dropping Partey back into that position was the first part of it. And we started to see it last season, but bringing Zinchenko in, and we should consider those two a central midfield partnership. I think essentially that's been like a real game changer. And yeah,
Tim, for me, it's almost like he's also added recovery runs late in his tenure with Arsenal. He does one in this game. We saw it just before he had that brief period out with his muscle pull, where he's like tracking down forwards from behind at speed.
That sprint that everyone was talking about. Yeah.
He's got such a long stride on him, and the way he's able to, he's just got this really nice tackling style as well, where he kind of nicks the ball. He never slides in. He either gets his body between the player and the ball, or he's just able to get a foot, like
telescoping.
I kind of loath to make the comparison. It's very Vieira-esque. That's exactly how Vieira used to recover the ball. Like, you'd think the player's gone, and then all of a sudden, go gadget leg comes out, extends to about 6 or 7 feet, it seems, and then just scoops the ball away, and then it's forward. We're forward. He either takes it on a couple of yards, or he's punching the ball between the lines again, and it's
like it kills off hope in the other team. Maybe that's projection, but you get this idea that it's like, fuck, even when we got the better side of them, even when we're past them, they take the ball off us.
Yeah, precisely. And Ødegaard's a big part of that as well. I mean, we can all see what that guy can do on the ball, and it's incredible. And he pulls out he tries to pull out the elastico as well in the second half, known to some people as the flip flap, where you spin the ball on your boot. It doesn't quite come off, but he's just got all that insouciance in tight spaces to try that stuff and swap the ball between his feet. Like, you know, you can see he can do all of that and he can pick the passes. But the thing that really jumped off the screen at me in this game, that perhaps you notice it more when he doesn't play for a game, is the pressing. And I know you mentioned it on the post-Lisbon podcast, Elliot, like how quickly he either starts the press or just gets across to his man and blocks those passing lanes. And Zinchenko and Partey, like when the other team have the ball, it's almost like, you know, that kind of I don't know what the term for it is, but like the fire blanket, you know, like there's a big fire starting, and then you throw the fire blanket over it, and then nope, that's it, fizzled out. And that's kind of what it feels like. But Ødegaard is part of that as well. But obviously his technical level on the ball, he draws players to him, and he can cope when he's got 2 or 3 players around him. Absolutely no problem at all. And actually, I think it sometimes helps him because he can drop that shoulder, get the ball on his left foot, or go outside to Saka. And I think you're right. I think those 3 are so important to what Arsenal have been doing this season.
Yeah, well said. And I just think, you know, there's a famous quote in American politics. It's the economy, stupid. For me with football, it's the midfield, stupid. Like I really don't think there are good teams that have bad midfields. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure people will inundate me with examples. But I really think if you win the midfield, if you have a technical level in the midfield that teams can't contest that area, can't win in that area, you can win. And I think when we were at our low ebb, we were easily pressed in midfield and struggled with it. You look at how well Shaq is doing now. It's because he doesn't have to dance around pressure in a double pivot, you know, sitting deep. He doesn't have to take the ball off Ramsdale facing his own goal under immense pressure. There are guys better suited to that who do it and turn and wriggle out of pressure and cool as you like. And he does all the other stuff he can do that he is good at. When we were vulnerable to being targeted in midfield, those were some of our darkest times. And right now, you want to target us? Good luck. Good luck to you. Because you're not going to get close. You're going to get played past, and Fulham did time and time and time again. And then you get into space, and whatever struggles we had against a low block, you get Martinelli in space, you get Saka in space, you get Trossard in space, you get Ødegaard with the ability to make a second man run with defenders running back towards their goal, and look what happens. And there were so many chances to make this 4, to make this 5, to make this 6. Ødegaard blazed one over from a good Nelson cutback, actually. I believe it was a good Nelson cutback. Martinelli played in Xhaka, but it was a little heavy. It was right to the keeper. There was a White had an in-swinger to Martinelli at the back post, beautiful, and Martinelli shins it, and it's well saved by Leno. I think I mentioned that earlier. There were chances. There were lots and lots of chances. So I think we have to get to the headline of the whole game, though. We've taken almost an hour to get there, Paul. I'm not going to use it now. I'm not going to go with a pun. I'm just going to say it. Gabriel Jesus is back. And it's not just the fans who have to be lifted by this. I really believe for the players, this is a shot in the arm. He and Vieira come on, and I think Vieira will felt a bit aggrieved to have not kept his place after his midweek performance. And I think Vieira did something so important in this game that Arteta might have to pick him now every game. He got a call from the referee that he did not deserve. And if he can do that, we need that in our team. But all kidding aside, one of the funniest things I've ever seen led to a great Arteta finger wag when Vieira trips himself up in acres of space, no one nearby, and the ref gave him the foul. And it's like, of all the calls we needed this season, that's the one you're going to give us 3-0 up in the 90th minute or whatever the hell it was. And Arteta goes with the finger wag. But Paul, I had mentally prepared myself for the idea that Gabriel Jesus is going to need time to look like Gabriel Jesus. Don't get freaked out if the touch is rusty. Don't get freaked out if he's not banging bodies with defenders and winning 40, 60s. Just let him get up to speed. Well, as everybody knows, I'm a moron because he didn't need that at all. He did a spin for the chance he doesn't finish. By the way, what's the best sign that he's back to himself? 5 minutes in, he has a big chance missed. But Paul, like for that big chance that he misses, he does a spin flick to set Vieira free that is up from another planet. He sends in Nelson, who probably could score, but instead cuts back. He wins 50-50s. He's banging bodies. And of course, he does have the big missed chance, which is the purest sign that he's back. I thought this was, and I realize we all want him to be great, so we're prone to going over the top, but I really thought this was a vintage 20 minutes from Jesus, I should say 13 minutes from Jesus that to me looked like he had never been gone. It was really encouraging.
Yeah. Like you have a picture of him. You think he's going to come back and pop. You think he's going to have an impact. And then he does that and you're like, wow, I thought I had the picture. I completely underestimated what an impact that guy has when he's in the pitch, when he's within that team. It was just, my jaw dropped. He was running at a different speed and intensity and physicality, just in the small things he was doing before he'd even done anything. I'm like, holy crap! I'd forgotten that's what it looked like. Yeah, I think when you're in this squad, in this team, like the only thing you care about at this point, is that your team, that this thing you're part of, goes all the way, wins the big one, gets you there. And like, I think your calculations as to whether you're a starter or not at any particular moment, there's a point at which it's just about like lifting the team. We're still in two competitions. You see that guy come in, and I think everybody in the team says, oh, thank God. Just that little bit of pressure lifted, that it won't have to be you every time, every game that does the big thing. That this guy is there now, and you have a piece of the pie. You don't have to do the whole pie. I think psychologically it's huge, absolutely huge that he came back. As we talked about with the bench, Tim talked about eloquently, like you mentioned the other side of this in the instant reaction, Elliot, that like just a couple of games ago, it's funny how the bench starts to look a little thin with an injury or two here while you're waiting for a couple of bodies back. And suddenly you look at our bench with these guys, assuming the bench is wooden and people keep knocking on the wood. This is a pretty damn good bench going into this critical phase. We've got an interlull, which we hope works in the positive sense rather than negative sense, that everybody makes sure they don't play for their national team. And if they've to travel, they don't get any minutes. And we come out of this international interlull, unlike the last one, with everybody actually charged up, focused. Like the last one was about going to a World Cup, getting positioned, getting in the frame for that. This one, players are going to go away if they have to go, thinking, I want to be 100% ready for when I get back to win the big one. And so I'm hoping this is one more moment where Arsenal will come out of the interruption, not losing pace, but gaining a pace. Because our bench right now, with this guy back in the frame, he was absolutely fantastic in those 13 minutes. And I think it's a shot of electricity through this team as they look, instead of the run in being something that's a bit scary, they're feeling strong.
Yeah, well said. I mean, Tim, it's so important to have him back. It really, and you could see it. And what a luxury this game was. We really, 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 really did exactly what we needed to do because, first of all, Zinchenko and Saka off at 70 minutes, 72 minutes. That's a nice luxury. Martinelli and Trossard off at 77 minutes. You get to bring Jesus in with enough time to get a feel for the game, but not in to rescue it. You're not throwing him on as a late roll of the dice, come be our savior, he says, again, not leaning into any kind of biblical or religious association there.
And we didn't have to crucify him for that miss at the end,
Nailed it.
No, there you go.
Yeah, had it. It was so close, but the morning brain wasn't there. But you know what, Tim, I think I was trying to decide, what do I want to see from Jesus to feel good about him being back? And I think the thing I wanted to see is him putting himself into contact. You know what I mean? Because his game is about not avoiding contact. It's about inviting contact. His game is about being willing to get in there and win those duels. And he did it. He did it. And he did it not just well, but with a touch of class. I mean, I really implore anybody who doesn't remember it to go back and look at the move where he misses the big chance. It is a phenomenal little spin flick that he does to send Vieira in. And it's while riding contact, so to speak. It was just a performance from Jesus that said to me that if he needs to just start a game soon, we can expect a pretty high level. Now, he may only have an hour in him. That may be the issue more than anything. And I may be projecting based on my body insecurities. He looked maybe slightly chunkier to me, but it's hard to stay athlete fit when you have a couple months where you're not allowed to run or do anything like that. I'm sure that'll fall off him in 2 seconds, which, let me tell you, kids, as you get older, that's not how that works anymore. But so just really, really hugely encouraging. And I joked on the instant reaction that Mikel Arteta told a phenomenal lie at full time after saying that, Jesus convinced him today was the day. And then he said, now he has to earn his place in the team like any other player. And I was like, okay, buddy, you don't have to say that. No, I mean, he looked like someone who, as soon as he's fit enough, he has to come right back in.
To be fair to Mikel, the question from the journalist was, which player needs to be dropped for Jesus to come in? Which,
and by the way, I wouldn't want to have to answer that either because I have no idea who that player should be.
And that's where there's interrelation here between Trossard's performance, and you're right, Elliot, this was the perfect scenario to bring Jesus back into. Don't think he's going to start on Thursday. I wouldn't start him, but on Thursday he might need to rescue the game. That might be or we might not have scored yet. It might be 65, 70 minutes and it's 0-0, 1-1, whatever. I think there's a higher chance that might happen. And so what's encouraging is you look at what he did when he comes on against Fulham, and I think, if on 65 minutes on Thursday we're not a goal or two in front, or we're behind, or we're chasing, or whatever, I feel a lot happier about the idea. Realistically, I think what Trossard's performance does means that until the international break, we can just look after Jesus. And I think he can be on the bench for the next, assuming Trossard's all right, because obviously he had his own fitness questions. We can just keep that going till the international break. Jesus has not been selected for Brazil. That's another 2 weeks to train, maybe get a behind closed doors game in or something. And then straight after the international break, we can certainly throw him back in, I think. And then, then we've got competition, haven't we? Because Trossard's going to be difficult to leave out. Martinelli's difficult to leave out. You can't leave Saka. You suddenly, from going from, oh my God, how do we make this front line work? It's, oh my God, who do we leave out? And how do we manage that? And you get the chance for short rotation and substituting players and managing minutes and all of that good stuff. So, but I I guess I didn't have the same level of doubts. Arteta said something interesting, didn't he, about like, I thought he needed a couple of extra days, but then I looked him in the eye the day before the game and thought, no, you're ready. The thing is about Jesus, I don't think he knows any other way to play, basically. So I don't think there was ever going to be a sense of him easing back in. I think what Arteta said is probably accurate, that like, right, you're ready to go and be Gabriel Jesus. I don't think Gabriel Jesus can do managing the game. I don't think he can do like,
That's good.
Come on. Yeah, exactly.
Because honestly, I think that's how you get hurt. I think that's how you turn an ankle or pull a muscle when you're not going full bore.
Yeah. But even like, Clive's talked a lot recently about Saka and the way he'll play in a Europa League game. Like Saka's smart enough to be like, I'm not gonna go full tilt, but I'm not within myself, but a little bit. I'll hold back a bit. Like Jesus can't do that and shouldn't do that because that's not who he is. And I think that's what Arteta was driving at. It was like, I was never gonna play like the Gabriel Jesus. Like Gabriel Jesus doesn't do 80%. Like it's full throttle, and he wanted to make sure that he had Gabriel Jesus ready to run through landmines to get the ball like that. That's who he is, and because maybe by the looks of it, right, we've been managing this situation for a little while, and maybe even a fortnight ago, Jesus could have been on the bench, or 10 days ago, or something like that. But I think they've been holding him back for. We know who this guy is and how he plays, and he's not going to do like 10 minutes holding back when it's 3-0. Like when he's on the pitch, he's gonna go for it. I think that's what Arteta was driving at, and I think that's what we saw. We saw like, there is no diet Gabriel Jesus. There is no I can't believe it's not Jesus. It's just like it's full fat or nothing, basically. So I think that's what we saw, and I think that's what Arteta's been kind of managing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I did tell you, though, that I think that will fall off him very quickly, that full fat, when he gets back up to speed in training. Kidding. Paul, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Mikel uses him and works him back in, because we have 2 games this week. Well, in the next 7 days, we got the Europa League, and then we have Palace at home. And then there's 2 weeks because there's an interlull. I think the inclination would be to be careful, but also you want to give him time, right? What you don't want to do is use him 5 minutes on Thursday and 5 minutes on Sunday, and then 2 weeks of no football, and you almost have to start him back over again. I think now that he's back, you want to give him 20 minutes on Sunday. You want to give him an hour, 20 minutes on Thursday. You want to give him an hour on Sunday so that he's got the feel of the game before the interlull rolls around. But to me, these next 2 Premier League games, Palace at home and Leeds at home, might be the 2 most important games of our season, because City don't play next weekend, and then they have Liverpool. Now, Liverpool just lost to Bournemouth. I'm not expecting Liverpool to get anything from City, but if they're going to drop points, that's one of the games that could happen. And that gives us a chance to go 8 points clear with a game. City would have a game in hand, but 8 points clear having played a game more, and then potentially 11 points clear if we can beat Leeds and if Liverpool can beat City. Again, with the caveat in place that I don't think that will happen with City, but very, very important, because as we know, once we get into April, then it does get tricky. And so we need to take advantage of a period where we look like there might be some advantage to take. Everybody's going to want to know who's going to get dropped. It's not really dropped, is it? It's not dropped. It wasn't dropped when Liverpool picked Jota over Firmino or Diaz over Mane. It's not dropped when you have players that caliber. But I guess it's, how's it going to be managed? And my assumption is that Trossard and Martinelli will share time on the left when Jesus plays, and Trossard and Jesus might share some time up front when Jesus isn't available. How would you approach the next 2 games with Jesus? And in general, do you think we just go back to that, that sort of standard that Saka starts on the right, Martinelli and Trossard share the left, and Jesus starts? Or do you think maybe in a period where Saka's trending towards 4,000 minutes in a season, we might even see a Martinelli on the left or on the right, or a Trossard on the right, and give Saka the opportunity not to have to play every game?
My guess is Saka will play every game.
Terrific. I mean, you're probably right. Yeah.
Football's easy for him. And there'll be games where, as Clive has talked about and we referenced here, he kind of plays a little bit within himself to be on the pitch for key moments, while the left side goes crazy and he waits for something to swing in his side so he can do something dangerous with it. Like he can just, there are players who can just play and play and play and manage themselves. And he's one of those, and like you don't want to change the dynamic on that side, even if it's not a game where it's absolutely firing or a game where he needs to be gangbusters. White, Odegaard, and Saka just have an understanding that allows the team to tick along. Saliba on that side, like Party tends to stick to that side, so there's no need to do anything crazy or different there, and you keep that ticking along. On the other side, I think it's going to be very much one game at a time, not just in terms of performances and wins. It'll be, what do we do with Gabriel Jesus? I suspect they don't have the plan we're talking about. What should they do for the second game? He comes back here. You know, they have a plan that they're formulating for Crystal Palace. After that, I think it's absolutely one game at a time. They don't know what they'll do for Leeds, and it'll be how he's responding, how the break went, all that kind of thing. I'm 100% sure that we're into ruthless territory, and he's going to do whatever is right to win the games as they come along, and that's probably starting Gabriel Jesus after the interlull, assuming everything has gone as well as planned. And yeah, the other guys, I think they're going to be fine with the idea that Martinelli will start some games, Trossard other games. Maybe, as you say, there'll be like you can just sub guys early. There's no Martinelli had a
5
fantastic
subs, share games. I can hear Clive screaming at this podcast saying it's not about who starts.
Yeah, like Martinelli's rejuvenation was as I don't even remember the game. It was a couple of games ago. He comes on as a sub after Trossard, I think, and he just lit it up. And it was his game. He was the hero of the game. They're not going to care if they get 30 minutes. Getting 5 minutes at the end of it, game after game, is going to piss you off. But getting 30 minutes, coming on, being the hero, tearing into target teams, like they know the big picture here. They know they're going for the big one. But yeah, it's on that left side. You could play Martinelli, Trossard, different looks against the same team later on in the game. It's one of those not a problems. Unfortunately, the Europa League, this will be the year we're probably going to win the damn thing because we're trying to subtly lose each two-leg tie. You know we're going to the final. You know when we're in the final, we're going to win it. And we're going to win the Premier League. Here's another aspect. We're going to be, potentially, we could get to 11 points ahead of Man City, which would be a beautiful thing. They've been looking up at us since the third game of the season. We have... Yeah. I had to go and check it to make sure I hadn't missed something here. But we've been the top of the league for whatever it is, 27 game weeks at this stage. At some stage, you just start believing it. At some stage, you're not the young team. You're not the kids. You got enough maturity in there. You got Jesus back. You got Zinchenko, Partey, and Odegaard just bossing it in the midfield. You got Gabriel, Saliba as your centre backs. And you're like, what are you to be super, super nervous about? You got Saka, like, oh my God, we've got a kid on the right wing, it's Saka. Oh, we've got a kid on the left wing, it's Martinelli. They don't care.
What's there to be super nervous about is just like, you want it so bad, right? It's not that you don't think you're good enough. Like at some point, I agree with you, Paul. It's not so much that you think you're not good enough, but the fact of the matter is, at some point, the desire to have the thing creates the nervousness about losing the thing.
Yeah,
right?
but the problem is when you check. But the problem is when you check the other side of the coin and you don't. When you look around you and like, but maybe we're not quite good enough. And you look around this team as Martinelli on the left wing, and you look around, you see Zinchenko, Partey, Saka, Odegaard, Gabriel Jesus, Trossard behind you, pushing you. Like, who on this team doesn't think they've got enough? It's such a good team when you look around it. You look around that dressing room. It's not like last year when you look around dressing room with 10 games to go or 5 games to go had we been leading the league. You look around this dressing room with 11 games to go and you're like, shit, yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. And my point wasn't to disagree so much as I don't think all nervousness comes from an insecurity, right? It can come from a desperation to do the thing.
Sure.
Tim, that leads to Thursday, and like, this was a brilliant game. I think sometimes you can look at substitution patterns as a bit of a hat tip to what's going to happen in the future, as a clue. That's a better English word for that. Clue is the word he couldn't think of, everybody. Wordsmith over here. So I wouldn't shed a tear if we crashed out of the Europa League.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want us to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's a good thing if it I wouldn't go so far as to say it would be good, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I would care, but I don't think it would be good. I realize that there are people that feel very, very strongly that winning begets winning and that losing can beget losing and that you don't want that to happen. I'll admit I'm fully on the fence about that, and I'm not sure I agree with that, but I acknowledge that I think it's probably worth trying to win the Europa League, especially now that we look a bit deeper and you can rotate. But that then requires you to actually rotate. And given that we drew the away leg and there is no away goals rule, it is on a bit of a knife edge. I believe, given that Partey played 90 minutes against Fulham, that Jorginho will get the game. I think that's one thing we can look at as a sign. I think some of the players that came off earlier might be a sign that they're going to start. How would you like Mikel to approach this midweek game versus how do you expect him to approach this midweek game?
I hate that you asked me that because the real answer is I don't know, because this is a much better topic to discuss in an audio format than it is to put in black and white on social media, because the number of people who just refuse to see the nuance of. I tweeted this morning, like, emotionally, my focus is like 90% on Sunday. And that's not saying that I think that's what the club's focus should be, what Arteta, the players, blah, 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 just emotionally.
Can I stop you for a minute? Just real quick. Sure. Did you see the celebration picture they took in the dressing room at full time?
Yeah.
And I think
With
Richard Keys retweeted it. He was really happy about it. But yeah, I mean, that's a big celebration picture. They obviously brought a freaking clock to the Fulham dressing room, and they're probably carrying that clock around, and it says 11-2. You 2 months to go, 11 games left. I would say emotionally, Tim, they are in the same place you are. I'd be willing to bet they are in the same place you are in.
Yeah. Paul, sorry, were you going to come in?
Did you need something, Paul?
Yeah, so like there's the whole thing about the emotion and it's a young team and getting too excited. What I think is particularly impressive about our emotional celebration energy thing is like, this is all within the team and within a box. It's not like individual players going rogue, talking, getting ahead of them, talking to everybody who'll put a microphone in front of them. I was thinking about it yesterday. I've seen less mature versions of this, and everybody's off script and everybody's super excited. These guys are all on script.
Speaking of that, did you hear them? I think 3 different players said we have to earn the right to win. Yeah. And one game at a time. I mean, it is like he's like passing around interview scripts because they're all repeating the same lines.
Yeah. So like this is a group mind. He's leaned into the energy of a young team. It's very hard to tell. It's just not realistic to tell a young team not to be excited to you haven't won anything till you've won anything kind of thing. Like they'll have those discussions, but this is not a bunch of guys who are getting overexcited.
I agree.
Premature celebrations.
You've got to harness it, and that's something Klopp was. We get all the Pep City comparisons, which we kind of peddle ourselves as well, and that's for obvious reasons. But there is a bit of Klopp Liverpool here as well, where it's like it's about managing the energy, not like too many people look at it as neutralizing or like, no, you've just got to use it and channel it correctly. And that's what I think we're talking about. But in terms of like Thursday, look, the honest answer is I don't know, because emotionally I'm with you, Elliot. I'm just not as I want us to win. I will go to the stadium. I will cheer for us to win. I will want us to win.
I'm really nice of you. Really good of you.
If we don't, this will be the easiest Europa League exit to accept. I was devastated, obviously, after the final, after Villarreal, after Atletico Madrid, after Olympiacos. I was devastated after all of those. I really wanted that trophy, and not just because of the Champions League thing. I wanted and still want a European trophy. Like, if you tell me we're going to win both of them, brilliant. I will be all over that. But I am invested in the league to a level I've never been invested before, because there was a period under Wenger where we were in these types of positions, but it happened every year, basically. So, like, you don't become inured to it, but you expect it. This is very different. This is the most I've been invested in the league since '98, where probably something similar happened. And so I'm kind of all over the place with Thursday, because I don't want the players to feel like I feel. I'm sure you're right, to a degree they must, but I want them to be fully focused. I'm not even convinced that whether going out would be good for us or anything like that. But once you get into the weeds and you look at some of those games we've got in April and May, and there's a big part of me that's looking at them and going, I'm not sure I want Europa League games thrown into that mix. But I also kind of think, well, cross that bridge when you come to it and all of that. I mean, I don't know. There should be some measure of rotation. I don't think it's going to be in the forward line. So Jorginho in for Partey, definitely. Tomiyasu maybe in for Ben. Like those types of changes, I'd be so comfortable with. Like Tomiyasu for Ben White. Tierney coming in. I don't think that's going to happen, because Zinchenko came off early, and the measure of control he gives us in midfield, I think, is just something that Arteta struggles to see us without, to be honest. But yeah, a few changes, basically. But I'm with you. I'm thinking about Sunday. I really am. And maybe I'm wrong, but look, the heart wants what it wants, Elliot. And sometimes what your heart wants and where your head's at do not tally with pragmatism and logic. And that's why it's such a difficult thing to say on social media, because everyone's like, you hate us and want us to lose. It's like, no. Or people come back and they're like, oh, but like the team can't do that. And it's like, I know, I'm not saying the team should do that. I'm telling you where I am emotionally, and I'm being honest with myself and you about where I am emotionally. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's illogical, blah, blah, blah. But emotionally, that's where I am. And like, you can't really change how you feel. You can change how you think. You can't change how you feel. And that's how I feel. And so, to be honest, a bit like the first leg, I'm not going to go mad over the starting lineup, no matter what it is, because to be honest with you, I do not have any idea how I would approach this in Arteta's shoes. I really don't.
Weird disclosure behind the scenes here, though. When we got together last weekend and you had a few Jaeger bombs, you did say I hate us and want us to lose, which I thought was weird. But all kidding aside, those very same people that would round on you on social media for giving your truth, if Jesus starts Thursday and does his knee again and is out the rest of the season, they'll be like, what was he doing using him in Europa League? Right? I mean, like, that's the point, right? We all think they should play every game until something happens in the game that's less valuable. And then we all think it was a giant mistake and he obviously should have avoided it. Who would want to be a manager? Because if you heavily rotate and crash out, people will say you should have taken it more seriously. If you don't heavily rotate and you lose an important player in a secondary competition, everyone will say you fucked it. Let me say this. I think the Europa League can provide one benefit, one important benefit. Look, the risk is clear. The more you play players, the more chance there is for players to get hurt. Anybody who denies that is just flat wrong. It's just flat. It is a reality. It's why, by the way, teams in the Europa League tend not to get back into the top four, because their attentions are stretched, and because you're a Premier League team, you're probably in it late, and they're stretched late in the season. And that doesn't help you. Look at the record of teams in Europe in the league after a European game. They're not good, especially away. And there's a reason they're not good. Players are tired. Players have a tough time focusing. Mikel Arteta spoke about it in his post-match comments. That he knew that it was hard. We had played Thursday. We needed to start fast and we needed time to get to that point. But here's where I think there's a benefit to the Europa League. Look at the Bournemouth game. You cannot weekend in and weekend out have that level of emotion invested in an outcome. It will tear you to pieces. It's too much. Your nerves will pop. We needed a nice, calm, tranquil win, and we got it. And having that is so important. You can't have outrage and ecstasy every weekend. It's too much. And what I think the Europa League did for us, I think one of the reasons we had the performance against Fulham we did is that we didn't play Fulham right after that Bournemouth game. We had a game in between to be a little ragged and, to take our foot off the gas maybe a little bit and to calm down and get our emotional levels from 120% back down to a nice 75%, right? To get our heart rate back to a normal level. Our heart rate after Bournemouth, and I can tell you this as someone who felt I might have needed a cardiologist, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And the one thing the Europa League can do, this is going to be a pressure cooker, you guys. I firmly believe last season, if we had Europa League between the Newcastle and Spurs games, we might have made top 4 because we might have been able to just take a little bit of the pressure off, that feeling that it was all on the line every weekend. And I do think that for a young team, getting a game in the midweek slot to just ease the pressure valve off. Again, we're going heavy soft factors here, and I acknowledged already the hard factor risk of injury and fatigue. But Paul, is there maybe just that slight bit of benefit to having the distraction in midweek so that you can clear your heads, get something like that Bournemouth win out of your mind, and get back down to business at the weekend, not having your heart rate at, in the red zone constantly nonstop between now and the end of May?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd I'd love us to have one competition to focus on, have a rhythm,
Yes.
not have to
Yep.
travel. But it's not all one way. There's benefits. There's players who need games. You want Trossard and Martinelli for the rest of the season to be feel engaged, keyed in. We talked about the instant reaction. Where does Smith Rowe stand? And there's going to be some players who have some big moments, big contributions, even if they're not starters. We've seen Nelson having his big moment. Tim added Eddie in the chat. There's going to be 3 or 4 players, and they know their job is when they get their chance to be completely ready, completely tuned in, to come on. We need a goal. There's 10, 15 minutes to go. Smith Rowe comes on, streaks in behind, bangs it in the corner, guides it in. We're off to the races. We're on a charge. And it'll be a brilliant season for Smith Rowe, even though he's barely played. And so one of the major things before we get to the final and win the Europa League in the year where it didn't really matter to us will be these guys feeling clued in, connected, excited. I'd prefer if we only had one competition to focus on, but there are several big pluses from being in the Europa League. And basically, if you're going to be there, you need to lean into the pluses, be super smart about your rotations, your use of players, so that when their moment comes in the Premier League, when there are 10 minutes to go, but they got to do something, they got to get a goal, an assist, change the dynamic, they know what they need to do. They're feeling confident. They know their role. There'll be significant roles to be played by the minor characters, cameos, if you like, in our run-in.
Yeah, I think we've already seen some of those. Reece Nelson, the obvious one, but there are more to come. I would just say this: I think if you want to really bring everybody into the tent and make them feel that they could score the winner at the Etihad, right, or score the winner against Palace or whatever, you got to show them that they can play against Sporting, and that's the tough thing. You want to beat Sporting, I get it. But how do you convince a Smith Rowe he's important in the group, right? How do you convince Jorginho? How do you convince Tierney? You play them. You play them. And I'm willing to watch Arsenal crash out with Kieran Tierney. And we all should be. He's a good player. He should play. I'm willing to watch Arsenal crash out with Emil Smith Rowe. He's a good player. He should, this should be a level that he can manage. I'm not saying Sporting are crap. I think we saw they weren't crap. They scored a beautiful goal of the weekend, by the way. But there comes a point where it's not just about resting your starters. It's about having your players who aren't starters play in an important game, not in the 80th minute of a 3-0 win, but from the start of the second leg of a European tie. So I hope he will do that. I think last thing here, Tim, with Jesus, You think it's a case he gets another 20 on Thursday and starts against Palace? Do you think that's the plan? I think roughly that's probably it. And I think it's probably, gosh, it may sound crazy. I think Saka might be due for rest, but maybe he will get it Thursday. I don't know. How do you see that playing out with Jesus? What do you think his integration will be leading up to the international break?
So definitely the bench on Thursday, but I think he might get a bit longer because he got his 15 minutes. It might be half an hour this time. And a lot of that, again, might depend, will probably be interlinked with Trossard as well, because he's come back earlier than we expected from an injury and probably requires some management as well. But I imagine in their heads, it's like, let's give him 15, let's give him 30. And then it's a case of, do you give him 30 again or do you give him 90? And honestly, I think that will depend on Trossard as well. Because if Trossard plays again on Thursday and he's great, then it kind of, at that point, it's kind of like, well, I've kind of got to keep him in. And it gives you a reason to further, to integrate Jesus a little bit more slowly. So I think it will be tied on into Trossard and how he plays and his physical state as well. If Trossard goes off after half an hour because he's done his groin again on Thursday, Jesus is starting on Sunday, I'm sure of it. And actually in that scenario, would Jesus be ready for an hour or that might be interesting because he probably wouldn't be ready for an hour on Thursday and 90 on Sunday. But I think, I think it would just depend on Trossard's. I'm quite confident in his form, but it might just depend on his kind of physical his physical state. My best guess is that Jesus will be on the bench for both games, and that he'll probably get around 25 to 30 minutes in both of them, then another 2 weeks of training. Like I said, probably if he doesn't start against Palace, I imagine they will arrange a behind closed doors game during the international break that he does start, so that they can perhaps get 60 or 70 minutes into his legs, so that when we play Leeds on April the 1st, maybe you can go the full 90 or at least 75.
Yeah. And there's going to be, to your point, Paul, there's going to be players that play an unexpected important role here. There are also going to be players that play less of a role than they would have liked. You know what I mean? That's part of it too. That may be Smith Rowe. I think we should leave it there. I do want to just apologize to Ben White, who we didn't really touch on in this game, and I thought was really good again after maybe being mixed on Thursday at best. But honestly, it was such a good performance. I think you could have highlighted anybody, and you would have had a right to do it. We'll leave it there. I assume there will be a rewatch. We're trialing a new thing for patrons, basically a power rankings episode, where what we do is we take the top 6 or 7 teams and we sort of power rank them, the big clubs, quote unquote, and power rank them, talk about what's going on with them, laugh at United for sure. Liverpool's frustration. We'll go through all that. So that's something new that we'll try to kind of round up some non-Arsenal stuff. Although I have to say, it's been so lovely sitting through a Saturday of football, not caring if Spurs win or lose, not caring what happens to Chelsea. We don't have to care. It's a beautiful thing. We don't even have to care about United, whose title challenge I feel like is struggling. Maybe just that might not be on, you guys. So we'll probably have that. We'll probably have a Fulham rewatch. We obviously have the game on Thursday. We'll have an instant reaction for that. So if you want to join us over there, we'd love to have you. But if not, we're just thrilled to have you here. As I mentioned, more news on live events coming. The Chicago event is announced. I'll put it in the link to the pod. And by the way, I was going to say something about the fundraiser, but we're still a little bit far out. That's going to be in April. So we'll leave that for later. Okay. Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, Pause.
Woohoo!
My name is Elliot. You can block me on Twitter. Yankee Gunner. We love you. And we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10 Sporting. No.